everyone. Miss Carol here. Thanks again for joining me as we continue on with our story of the Israelites and the last of the judges. I hope you all had a great week last week, and I hope you had a super duper Thanksgiving. And we have a lot to be thankful for, don't we? There's a lot going on in this world today, but even through it all, God is there, isn't He? And He's taking care of us, and we just have a lot to be thankful for, that we have God, don't we? And He's in our lives. All right, so let's do a little review since we weren't here last week and try to remember what we had talked about. If you remember, Samuel was taken by his mother Hannah, and he grew up in the tabernacle serving the Lord and helping Eli, didn't he? But what about Eli's two sons? Oh, they were horrible, weren't they? They were wicked and evil, and yet Eli made them priests, and they were terrible. And everyone knew it as well. And if you remember that night that God spoke to Samuel, He told him, He gave him a message for Eli about his sons, didn't He? That they were wicked and evil, and he shouldn't have allowed them to do all those evil things. And he told them that he said, I'm going to punish them, and they're both going to die on the same day. And if you remember when Samuel told that message to Eli, he said, let the Lord do what seems right to him. So Eli was aware that God was going to punish his sons, wasn't he? And then we talked about how the enemy, the Philistines, had come and were attacking the Israelites. And that was because the Israelites hadn't been doing what they were supposed to be doing, and they hadn't killed off all the Philistines when God said do it when you take over the land. So they were still fighting with them, and they were losing the battles. And so Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, got the brilliant idea that they would take the Ark of the Lord into battle. And if they took the Ark of the Lord into battle, then surely the battle would be won because God would be with them. But they made one very, very serious mistake when they decided to do that. And that was that they didn't ask God if that's what He thought they should do. They didn't ask God if that was His will that they take that ark into battle. And so because they didn't ask God, God wasn't going to be with them. God was angry with them. And so they take the ark into battle. And if you remember, they not only the Israelites lost the battle, over 30,000 were killed, but Hophni and Phinehas were also killed. And even worse than that, maybe, is that the Philistines took that Ark of the Covenant back with them to their country. Now, when they first brought the Ark out before the battle began, the Philistines said, oh my goodness, they're bringing a god into the battle. They're going to win it. We're doomed. We're going to have to fight harder than ever because with God, their God, in the middle of our battle, they're going to win. But they didn't know that they hadn't talked to their God about taking this ark into the battle. Anyway, they were able to capture the ark. That was horrible. And that ark was taken to the land of the Philistines. And one man escaped from the battle, and he ran all the way to Shiloh, where the tabernacle was, where Eli was, and he told Eli what had happened. He said, oh, we've lost the battle. It's been horrible. 30,000 have been killed. And then he said, and your two sons have died too. Now Eli, I don't know if he expected that to be the day that they were going to die, but he knew. Remember, God had told him through Samuel that his sons would die on the same day. But when he learned that the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord had been captured, he just fell backwards and he died. Now, Eli was an old man when he died. He was 98 years old, and he was blind. And he had served as a judge of the Lord for more than 40 years when he had died. And so Samuel takes over. And remember, now Samuel has many different jobs, doesn't he? He's taking over for Eli as priest. He's taking over for Eli as judge. And he's already become a prophet from a very young age. A prophet, remember, is someone that God talks to and delivers a message. And then it's up to the prophet to go and tell the people the message that God has for them. And Samuel had already been doing that job. But let's find out exactly what happened once those Philistines had taken God's ark. Let's find out what had happened when they took that to their country. And so we're going to begin in 1 Samuel chapter 5, verse 1, which says, "After the Philistines had captured the ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then they carried the ark into Dagon's temple." And Dagon was one of the gods that they worshipped. And they had made an idol to look like what they thought this god of theirs should look like. And they had built a temple. So you see there where they have put the ark of the Lord inside this temple with this idol. And when the people of Ashdod rose up early the next day, there was Dagon, their idol, fallen off that pedestal on the floor on his face. Well, they couldn't believe how that could have happened. So they took that idol, Dagon, and put him back in his place. But when they went in to the temple, their temple, the following morning, there was Dagon. Do you see him? He had fallen face down on the ground as before, and right in front of the ark of the Lord. But now his head and his hands had been broken off, and they were lying in the doorway to the temple. And that is why to this day neither the priest of Dagon nor any others who enters Dagon's temple at Ashdod step on that threshold. And while they had the ark of the Lord's hand was heavy on the people. In other words, he's making this hard for them. And he brought devastation upon them. They were afflicted with diseases. And when the men of Ashdod saw what was happening, they said, "The ark of the God of Israel must not stay here, because his hand is on us now. He's against us and against Dagon our God." So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and asked them, "What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel?" And they answered, "Well, have the ark of the God of Israel moved to another city, to Gath." So they moved the ark of God to the city of Gath. But after they moved it, then the Lord was against the people of Gath, and they were in great panic, and they all became sick, and it was terrible. And so they sent the ark out of their city into another city called Ekron. And then the people of Ekron cried out, and he afflicted both the old people and the young people, and they were sick too. And as the ark of God was entering Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, "They brought the ark of the God around us to kill us and our people." And so they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and said, "Send the ark of the God of Israel away. Let it go back to its own place, or it will kill us and our people. For death has filled the city with panic. God's hand was very heavy upon us. Those who did not die were afflicted with diseases." And then we learn when the ark of the Lord had been in the Philistine territory for 7 months, the Philistines called for their priest, Dagon's priest, and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us how we should send it back to its place." And the leader said, and the priest said, "Well, let's get a cart. Get a new cart, like a wagon, ready. And make 2 cows pull it. 2 cows that have never had to pull anything. 2 cows that have just given birth to 2 calves, 2 baby calves. Now hitch the cows to the cart, but take away their calves and pin them up. And then take the ark of the Lord and put it on the cart. And send it on its way, but keep watching it. And if it goes up to its own territory, back to the Israelite territory, toward Beth Shemesh, one of the towns, then the Lord himself is the one that has brought this great disaster on us because we captured the ark. But if those cows don't follow the path and go to Beth Shemesh, if they stay here and go back and listen to their calves, because their calves would have been calling for their mamas, if they turn around and go toward their calves and stay here, then we know it wasn't the Lord's doing at all. It was just by chance that all this has happened to us." And so they did this. They took 2 such cows and hitched them to the cart and pinned up their calves. They placed the ark of the Lord on the cart, and then the cows went straight up toward the Israelite town of Beth Shemesh. Keeping on the road, they followed all the way. They did not turn to the right or to the left. They paid no attention to their calves. They just kept walking toward the city of the Israelites. And the rulers of the Philistines followed them as far as the border of the Israelites of Beth Shemesh. Now, the people of Beth Shemesh were harvesting their wheat in the valley when they looked up and saw the ark coming toward them, and they rejoiced at the sight. And the ark came with its cart to the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh, and there it stopped beside a large rock. And the people chopped up that cart and offered sacrifice to the Lord. And the Levites took down the ark of the Lord and placed it on a large rock. And on that day, the people of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and made sacrifices to the Lord. And the 5 rulers of the Philistines saw all this, and they returned that same day to Ekron. All right, so now God has made certain, hasn't he, that that ark is back where it belongs with his people. All right, so then the Philistines continued to attack, but God stood up for them now. And Samuel sacrificed to the Lord. And so the Philistines were subdued. In other words, they decided not to attack God's people anymore, okay? And they didn't try to invade the Israelite territory again. And throughout Samuel's lifetime, the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines. And they were able, the Israelites were able to take back the towns that the Philistines had taken away from them, from Ekron to Gath, and they restored them to Israel. And there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. So Samuel continued as judge over Israel all the days of his life. From year to year, he went on a path like a traveling priest or judge at whichever he was doing, and he judged Israel in all those places, but he always went back to his hometown of Ramah, where his home was, and there he also judged Israel. And he built an altar there to the Lord. And when Samuel was old, he appointed his sons as judges for Israel. The name of the first one was Joel, and the second was Abijah. But they did not walk in the ways of the Lord. They turned to dishonest gain. They took bribes, in other words. They would take money from people to say that this person was in the right and this person was in the wrong. So if you paid them, they would judge for you and for your sake instead of saying he's guilty, no, you're guilty, which was so wrong. So all the elders of Israel gathered together, and they said, You are old, Samuel, and your sons do not walk in your ways and the ways of the Lord. So now we want a king. We want you to give us a king to lead us. We want to be like all the nations that are around us. Wait a minute. Don't they already have a king? Who is their king? God is their king, isn't he? But no, they don't want. They want a king right here in front of them that they can see. But when they said, give us a king to lead us, Samuel was very upset with them. And so Samuel went to the Lord and he prayed. And he couldn't believe that this is what the people were asking for. And the Lord told him, listen, Samuel, to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected. It is me, their king, that they've rejected, as they have done from the day that I brought them up from Egypt. Until this day they have left me and served other gods, and now they're doing the same thing to you. So listen to them, but warn them and let them know what a king will do if he reigns over them. And so Samuel called all the people together, and he said, this is the words of the Lord. And you're asking for a king. This is his answer. God said, this is what the king who reigns over you, this is what he will do. He will take your sons and he will make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will have to run in front of his chariots. And some of your sons he will make commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and others of your sons he will make to plow his fields and reap his harvest, and others he will give to making weapons of war and making chariots. And he will take your daughters to live in the palace to make perfume and be cooks and be bakers. And he will take the best of your fields and your vineyards and your olive groves, and he will give them to his attendants in his palace. And he will take 1/10 of your grain, and he will give it to his officials and his attendants. Your servants and the best of your cattle and your donkeys he will take to use for himself. And he will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you yourselves will actually become his slaves. And when that day comes, you will cry out to the Lord that for that king you have chosen you don't want anymore, and the Lord will not answer you in that day, because this is what you have chosen. But the people refused to listen to Samuel. No, they said, we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations. With a king to lead us, we can go out and fight our battles. And when Samuel heard all that the people said, he went to the Lord and he told the Lord exactly what they told him. And the Lord said, listen to them, Samuel. Give them that king that they want. So Samuel went back to the men of Israel and said, all right, I've spoken to the Lord. Every one of you go back to your cities. Now next week we'll find out what happens. God has said, okay, you want a king? You don't want me to be the king over you? You want a human to be a king over you, just an ordinary man? Well, you'll get that king. But you'll be sorry when you have a king. You'll be sorry. But if you want it, I'll give it to you. So we'll find out next week who the Lord chooses to be the first king of Israel. All right. Love you all and miss you all and hope you're all staying well. And look forward to us all coming back together next week and learning about this new man who is going to become the first king of Israel. Love you. Bye-bye.